Before we begin, it's important to state that this presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Law School Admission Council. The strategies discussed in this video are based on my own analysis and experience, and while they are designed to be effective, they do not constitute a guarantee of any specific score or outcome on the LSAT. You stare at the screen. The clock is a tiny digital guillotine counting down in the corner of your monitor. You've just spent 3, maybe 4 precious minutes reading a 500-word passage about the jurisprudential differences between two 18th-century legal scholars you've never heard of. Your eyes are glazing over. You highlighted half the passage, which you now realize is the same as highlighting nothing at all. And then the first question pops up. The author's primary purpose in the passage is to... And your mind goes completely, terrifyingly blank. You just invested a huge chunk of your section time reading, and you have absolutely no idea what the point was. You can feel the panic starting to bubble in your chest. You glance back at the passage, frantically scanning for something. Anything. But it all just looks like a wall of words. If that scenario sounds even remotely familiar, you need to listen very closely. Because that feeling, that specific brand of intellectual vertigo, is the single biggest reason why most people's reading comprehension scores get stuck in a rut. It's not about reading speed. It's not about vocabulary. And it is certainly not about intelligence. The reason you're struggling is that you are approaching LSAT reading comprehension with the exact wrong mindset. You are walking into a gunfight armed with a textbook. You see, from the moment we learn to read in school, we are trained to read for one thing, information retention. We read a chapter on the Civil War to remember dates, names, and battle outcomes for the test on Friday. We read a biology textbook to memorize the Krebs cycle. We are taught to be students. We absorb, we memorize, we regurgitate. And for our entire academic careers, that has worked. But the LSAT is not an academic test. It is a logic test disguised as an academic test. And trying to use your student mindset on this section is like trying to build a house by memorizing the names of all the trees in the forest. It's not just inefficient, it's fundamentally missing the point. Let's call this the student trap. The student trap is believing your job is to become a temporary expert on whatever topic they throw at you. Be it the physics of string theory, the evolution of jazz music, or the social structures of ant colonies. The student reads the first sentence and thinks, okay, I need to understand this. They see a complex detail and think, I better highlight this in case they ask about it. They get to the end of the passage, their brain crammed with dozens of disconnected facts, and feel a false sense of accomplishment. But then the questions hit. And the questions are almost never, what was the name of the scientist mentioned in paragraph 3? The questions are, what is the main point? What is the author's tone? Which of the following, if true, would most weaken the author's argument? What is the function of the second paragraph in relation to the first? These are not questions about information. They are questions about structure, purpose, and logic. And the student, who spent all their energy trying to memorize the names of the bricks, has no idea what the blueprint of the house looks like. They get crushed. They run out of time. They guess on the last passage, and they walk away convinced they are just a slow reader. But what if I told you there's another way? A better way? A way that doesn't require you to read faster or have a photographic memory. A way that allows you to read a passage one time, calmly and efficiently, and then answer the questions with a staggering degree of confidence. This method involves a simple but profound shift in your perspective. It's about taking off your student hat and putting on a different one. You need to stop reading like a student and start reading like an architect. What does an architect do when they look at a building? They don't count the bricks. They don't analyze the color of the paint on one specific wall. They see the structure. They see the foundation, the support beams, the load-bearing walls. They understand how each floor connects to the next. They understand the function of each room and the overall purpose of the building. They see the blueprint. This is exactly what you need to do on LSAT reading comprehension. Your job is not to memorize the content, the bricks. Your job is to map the structure of the argument, the blueprint. You are there to identify the primary components of the passage and understand how they fit together to serve a single, overarching purpose. When you read with the architect's mindset, your internal monologue completely changes. Instead of thinking, I need to remember this fact, you start thinking, what is the author doing with this paragraph? Is she introducing a problem? Is he presenting a long-held theory that he's about to attack? Is she providing evidence to support the claim she made in the first sentence? You stop getting lost in the what and start focusing on the why. Think about it. Every single reading comprehension passage you will ever face was written by a human being to achieve a specific purpose. It wasn't just a random collection of facts. The author had a point to make, an argument to build. There is a logical flow, a deliberate structure to every single one. Your task as the architect is to reverse engineer that structure. You need to identify 4 key things on your first read-through. Just 4. First, the main point or central argument of the entire passage. What is the one big idea the author wants you to walk away with? Second, the author's attitude or tone. Is she a passionate advocate for an idea? Is he a neutral, objective observer? Is she critical of a certain viewpoint? Third, the specific purpose of each and every paragraph. Why is this paragraph here? Does it provide background? Does it introduce a counterargument? Does it offer a solution? And fourth, the overall flow or organization of the passage. How do these paragraph purposes connect to tell a coherent story? If you can train yourself to read for these 4 structural elements, the details become almost irrelevant on the first read. Why? Because you will have a perfect mental map of the passage. When a question asks about a specific detail from paragraph 3, you won't have to frantically search the whole passage. You'll know exactly where to look because you'll remember, paragraph 3. That's where the author presented the evidence for her main claim. You'll go directly to that spot, find the detail you need, and answer the question correctly and efficiently. This is the secret. This is the unlock. The top scores on this section are not speed readers with superhuman memories. They are strategic deconstructors. They are architects of the text. They know that the LSAT is an open book test. You don't get extra points for memorizing. The passage is always right there. The skill is not in holding all the information in your head, but in knowing how that information is organized so you can find what you need when you need it with lightning speed. Over the course of this presentation, I am going to give you the complete toolkit to make this shift. We are going to transform you from a panicked student, drowning in a sea of details, into a calm, methodical architect who can see the hidden structure in any passage they put in front of you. You will learn how to identify the main point within the first 30 seconds of reading. You will learn to recognize the specific keywords and transition phrases that signal the passage's structure. You will learn how to anticipate the kinds of questions they'll ask you before you even see them. This isn't about tricks or gimmicks. This is a fundamental, systematic approach that will permanently change your relationship with this section of the test. So, how do we actually begin to build this skill? How do we train our brains to stop focusing on the bricks and start seeing the blueprint, especially under the intense pressure of the clock? It all starts with the very first thing you do when you start a new passage. It starts with a technique I call purpose-driven reading, and it's going to force you to find the author's entire agenda in the first paragraph. Let's break down exactly how to do that step by step. The first paragraph is the entire game. It's the battlefield where the author plants their flag, and if you don't know exactly what that flag says and why they planted it there, you're going to lose the war. Purpose-driven reading isn't about speed reading. It's about precision. It's about reading that first paragraph with such intense, surgical focus that you extract the author's entire agenda before you even move on to the second paragraph. Think of yourself as a detective arriving at a crime scene. You're not just casually looking around. You're searching for clues, for motive, for the story of what happened. You are interrogating the text. And to do that, you need a set of questions. For every single LSAT Reading Comp passage you ever do for the rest of your life, I want you to ask 3 specific questions about that first paragraph. Question 1. What is the established view, the old idea, or the background problem? LSAT passages almost never just start with the author's main point. They need to set the stage. They'll introduce a commonly held belief, a traditional theory, a long-standing problem, or just some general context that the rest of the passage is going to react to. Your first job is to identify that setup. What's the thing that existed before the author showed up? Question 2. What is the new idea, the author's main point, or the central argument? This is the core of everything. Somewhere in that first paragraph, the author will pivot. They will introduce a twist, a challenge, a new interpretation, or their own unique thesis. This is their contribution. It's the however, the but, the yet. The recently scholars have argued. It's the new information that the entire passage is built around. This is the author's flag on the battlefield. And that leads to the most important question of all. Question 3. What is the author's purpose in presenting this new idea? In other words, how does the new idea relate to the old one? Is the author trying to completely destroy the old idea? Are they just trying to modify it slightly? Are they adding a small clarification? Are they solving the background problem they introduced? This question forces you to define the author's verb. What are they doing? Are they arguing, refuting, explaining, correcting, proposing? Pinpointing this verb is the single most powerful thing you can do to understand the passage. Let's see this in action. I'm going to read you a sample first paragraph that is stylistically identical to what you'd find on the LSAT. Just listen. For many years, legal historians have subscribed to the formalist interpretation of the doctrine of consideration in 19th century contract law. This view posits that courts required only a token exchange, the proverbial peppercorn, to render a promise enforceable, without regard to the actual economic value of the exchange. According to this interpretation, the doctrine served as a mere formality, a simple mechanism to distinguish serious promises from casual or social ones. However, a more nuanced analysis of case law from this period suggests that the formalist view is an oversimplification. In reality, many 19th century judges, while paying lip service to the peppercorn theory, were implicitly engaged in a substantive evaluation of the bargain, often refusing to enforce contracts they deemed overwhelmingly one-sided. Okay, dense, right? A typical LSAT paragraph. The old way to read this is to just let the words wash over you. You pick up legal historians, formalist, peppercorn, and you feel like you kind of get it. But you don't have a weapon. You don't have a roadmap. Now let's apply our 3 questions. Purpose-driven reading. Question 1. What's the established view or old idea? The paragraph makes this incredibly easy for us. It literally says, for many years, legal historians have subscribed to the formalist interpretation. Boom, there it is. The old idea is the formalist view. And what is that view? That consideration was just a simple formality, a token exchange, a peppercorn, to make a contract official. The value didn't matter. That's the world that existed before our author came along. Question 2. What's the new idea or the author's main point? Look for the pivot word. It's right there in the middle. However, that word is a giant flashing sign that says, the author's opinion is coming. After however, the author states their point. A more nuanced analysis suggests that the formalist view is an oversimplification. And what's the truth according to the author? That judges were actually implicitly engaged in a substantive evaluation of the bargain. In simple terms, the author is saying, that old peppercorn theory is wrong. Judges did care about fairness and value, even if they said they didn't. That's the new idea. Now for the magic. Question 3. What is the author's purpose? How does the new idea relate to the old one? Let's use a verb. Is the author agreeing with the formalist view? No. Is the author explaining the formalist view? Only to set it up. The author's new idea is that the formalist view is an oversimplification. They are arguing against it. They are challenging it. They are correcting a misunderstanding. So the author's purpose is to refute the traditional formalist interpretation and argue for a more nuanced view where judges substantively evaluated contracts. Let's put that all together into one simple, powerful sentence. This is what you should be able to say to yourself after reading the first paragraph. The author's purpose is to argue against the traditional formalist view of contract law by showing that 19th century judges actually did consider the fairness of bargains. Do you see how powerful that is? That one sentence is your roadmap for the entire rest of the passage. It's not just a summary, it's a prediction. What do you expect the author to do in the next few paragraphs? Well, if their goal is to prove that judges cared about fairness, they're probably going to give us examples, right? They'll likely cite specific court cases. They might quote a judge. They might explain the economic context of the 19th century that made this fairness evaluation necessary. You are no longer a passive reader, just waiting to see what comes next. You are an active participant. You are anticipating the structure of the argument. When you see a specific case mentioned in paragraph 2, your brain won't see it as a random new detail. It will immediately categorize it as evidence supporting the author's main point. You have a mental framework to plug every single detail into. This is the absolute key. The LSAT doesn't ask you what the third sentence of the second paragraph said. It asks you why the author included that sentence. It asks about function, about purpose, about the structure of the argument. And by defining the author's purpose on a global scale right at the beginning, you've already done 80% of the work for those difficult questions. Contrast this with the old way. The passive reader finishes that first paragraph feeling overwhelmed. They have a vague cloud of terms in their head. Formalism, peppercorn, substantive evaluation. When they get to paragraph 2 and it starts talking about a specific court case like Smith versus Jones from 1882, their brain has to start from scratch. They have to read it, try to understand it, and then try to figure out how it connects to that first paragraph. This is where you waste time. This is where you have to reread. This is where confusion sets in. The purpose-driven reader, on the other hand, sees Smith versus Jones and thinks, "Ah, here it is. Here is the promised evidence. This must be a case where the judge said he only cared about the peppercorn, but his ruling shows he was actually worried about the fairness of the deal." You're reading with a sense of expectation. You're confirming a hypothesis you already formed. It's faster, it's more accurate, and frankly, it's 1,000 times less stressful. This 3-question method, old idea, new idea, author's purpose, is your new religion for the first paragraph of every RC passage. It forces you to cut through the noise and identify the argumentative core. It gives you a predictive model for the rest of the passage. But now this raises a new question. Once you have this powerful author's purpose sentence locked in your mind, how does that change the way you read the rest of the passage? How do you fly through the dense, boring body paragraphs without getting stuck in the weeds, while still picking up the exact details you'll need for the questions? Because you can't just skip them. There's a specific way to navigate them, a way to tag information based on the roadmap you've already created. And that's exactly what we're going to cover next. I'm going to show you how to turn your author's purpose statement into a high-speed navigation system for the body of the text. So, think of the passage as a city. Your author's purpose statement is your final destination. You know you need to get to the museum on the other side of town, but knowing your destination isn't enough. You need street signs. You need to know which roads are major arteries, which are dead ends, and which are scenic routes that provide context. That's what tagging is. It's creating a set of simple, powerful street signs on the fly, so when you get to the questions, you don't have to pull over and stare at the entire map from scratch. You can just glance at your annotations and say, "Ah, I need to find a specific piece of evidence. I know exactly which street that's on." This isn't about highlighting every other word or underlining entire paragraphs. That's the equivalent of spray painting the entire city yellow. It doesn't help you navigate, it just creates noise. Our system is precise. We're going to use just a handful of tags to identify the function of each part of the passage. Why is this sentence here? What job is this paragraph doing? The LSAT doesn't care if you remember the specific name of a 17th century legal scholar. It cares if you understand why the author brought him up in the first place. Let's start with the core tags. You can develop your own, but these 5 will cover about 90% of what you'll encounter on the LSAT. First, we have B for background or context. This is the setup. It's the once upon a time part of the passage. It gives you dates, names, definitions, or the general state of the world before the author's main point kicks in. If a sentence tells you, "In the early 20th century, most physicists accepted the plum pudding model of the atom," that's pure background. It's setting the stage for what's about to be challenged. Second, T for thesis or theory. This is a major claim, a hypothesis, or a point of view being presented. It's not just a fact, it's an argument. This could be the author's main thesis, or it could be a theory the author is about to discuss or debunk. For example, however, a new theory proposed by Johnson suggests that this traditional view is fundamentally flawed. That's a big signpost. That's a T. Third, we have E for evidence or example. This is the support structure. The author makes a claim, a T, and now they have to back it up. This can be data, a historical event, a quote from an expert, a case study, or a simple for instance. If you see the words for example, for instance, as shown by, or a reference to a specific study, your brain should scream evidence. And you should be marking it with an E. Fourth, C for contrast or comparison. This is one of the most important tags on the LSAT because the test makers love passages that weigh 2 or more ideas against each other. Anytime you see words like however, but, on the other hand, alternatively, or in contrast, you're looking at a C. The author is pivoting. They're showing a conflict, a disagreement, or a different way of looking at something. This is where the drama of the passage lives. Finally, F for author's attitude or opinion. This is where you find the author's voice. They might explicitly say, "This argument is unconvincing," or they might use loaded words like fortunately, unfortunately, surprisingly, or predictably. This tag is pure gold because many LSAT questions hinge on understanding the author's perspective. Finding these little nuggets of opinion is like finding a cheat sheet for the test. So we have B, T, E, C, and A, background, thesis, evidence, contrast, and author's attitude. That's it. That's your navigation system. Now let's see it in action. I'm going to read a short LSAT-style paragraph, and then we're going to go back and tag it together. Here's the paragraph. For many years, legal scholars have subscribed to the theory of originalism, which posits that the Constitution should be interpreted according to the original intent of its framers. This approach, they argue, provides a stable, objective anchor for legal interpretation, preventing judges from imposing their own contemporary values. However, this perspective is not without its critics. Legal historian Joanna Freeman, for instance, argues that divining the singular intent of a diverse group of 18th-century men is a historically dubious task. She points to the often contradictory records and heated debates of the Constitutional Convention as powerful evidence that a unified, singular intent is a modern fiction. Okay, let's break that down sentence by sentence. The first sentence. For many years, legal scholars have subscribed to the theory of originalism, which posits that the Constitution should be interpreted according to the original intent of its framers. What is this sentence doing? It's introducing a major idea, a school of thought. It's the what we're going to talk about sentence. That's a classic thesis, or in this case, a theory. So we put a T next to it. It also has a bit of a for many years flavor, which could hint at background, but its primary job is to introduce the main concept. T is the stronger tag here. Second sentence. This approach, they argue, provides a stable, objective anchor for legal interpretation, preventing judges from imposing their own contemporary values. What's the function here? It's explaining why people support the theory of originalism. It's the evidence or reasoning for the first theory. This is a perfect E for evidence. It's the support for the T we just identified. Third sentence. However, this perspective is not without its critics. Boom. Red alert. That word, however, is a massive signpost. It's signaling a shift, a turn in the road. The author is introducing a conflict. This is a capital C for contrast. Right there, we know the rest of the paragraph, and maybe the whole passage is going to be about this conflict between originalism and its critics. Fourth sentence. Legal historian Joanna Freeman, for instance, argues that divining the singular intent of a diverse group of 18th-century men is a historically dubious task. We see, for instance, which is a giveaway for E. But what's she giving an example of? She's the critic mentioned in the previous sentence. Her argument is the counter theory. So this sentence is doing two things. It's presenting the counter-argument, which is a new T, a thesis of the critics, and it's also serving as an example of the criticism. You could even label it C/T for a contrasting theory. Final sentence. She points to the often contradictory records and heated debates of the Constitutional Convention as powerful evidence that a unified, singular intent is a modern fiction. What's the job of this sentence? It gives the specific proof for Joanna Freeman's argument. It uses the phrase powerful evidence. The passage is practically screaming at you. This is an E. It's the evidence for the counter theory. Look what we have now. In the margin of our page we have a little sequence, DCT, we have a theory, the evidence for it, a pivot to a contrast, the counter theory, and the evidence for that. This took maybe 20 seconds to do, but we now have a perfect structural skeleton of the paragraph. We didn't get bogged down in originalism or Joanna Freeman. We focused on the function. Now imagine a question that asks, the author mentions Joanna Freeman primarily in order to. You don't have to reread a thing. You look at your tags. You see she was introduced right after the C for contrast, and her point is labeled as a T for theory. The answer is going to be something like, present an opposing viewpoint to the theory of originalism. It's right there in your map. You've already done the work. This is the key. You're not just reading for content. You're reading for structure. You're anticipating the questions. The LSAT writers build these passages with a clear rhetorical structure, and this tagging system simply decodes that structure in real time. Now you might be thinking, this sounds great, but won't it slow me down? And that is a perfectly valid concern. In the beginning, yes, it will feel a little slow. You're learning a new skill. It's like learning to type without looking at the keys. At first, it's clunky and you're slower than you were before. But you stick with it, and soon your fingers are flying across the keyboard at a speed you never could have achieved with the old hunt and peck method. This is the same thing. You're investing 30 to 45 seconds on the front end to build this structural map. But that investment pays off massively when you get to the questions. You'll stop rereading the passage 3, 4, 5 times, hunting for some half-remembered detail. Your map will take you directly to the answer, saving you minutes of precious time and, more importantly, saving you the mental energy that gets depleted by frantic searching. It's the definition of slowing down to speed up. So we have our destination from the author's purpose statement, and now we have our street signs from tagging. We've built a powerful dynamic map of the entire passage. We know what the author is trying to do, and we know how step by step they are trying to do it. But a map is only useful if you know how to use it to answer specific questions. What good is knowing where the evidence is if you don't know what an inference question is really asking for? How does knowing the author's attitude help you tackle a strengthened/weakened question? That's the final piece of the puzzle. We need to connect our map to the questions themselves. And that's where we're going next. I'm going to show you how this map you've created turns the most common and feared LSAT question types into simple, predictable exercises. We're about to turn defense into offense. So you have your roadmap, your elegant, one-page summary of the passage's structure, its viewpoints, and its ultimate purpose. Now what? Most test takers think the hard part is over. They're wrong. The hard part is resisting the urge to treat every single question as a brand new, terrifying scavenger hunt back into the dense jungle of the text. They read a question, panic, and immediately start rereading entire paragraphs, hoping to stumble upon the answer. This is a losing strategy. It's slow, it's inefficient, and it plays right into the hands of the test makers. Your roadmap is not just a summary, it's a weapon, and we're going to use it to attack the questions with a simple two-step process I call predict and confirm. This method will fundamentally change your relationship with the answer choices. Right now, you probably read the question and then go shopping through the 5 options, hoping one of them looks good. The problem with shopping is that the LSAT is a master of creating incredibly tempting, beautifully packaged wrong answers. They look shiny, they use words from the passage, they feel rightish. But they are poison. When you predict and confirm, you stop being a shopper. You become a detective with a search warrant. You know exactly what you're looking for before you even look at the options. Here's how it works. For every single question, you will first read the question stem. Second, you will look at your roadmap, and only your roadmap, and formulate a prediction of what the correct answer must say. You'll create a rough draft of the answer in your own mind. Third, and only then will you scan the 5 answer choices, looking for the one that is a direct match for your prediction. The final step, confirm, is to glance back at the passage to verify your choice, but only if you have to. For many questions, you won't even need this last step. The match will be so obvious, so clear, that you can pick it and move on with absolute confidence. Let's see how this demolishes the most common question types, starting with the big one. The main point or primary purpose question. These questions are a gift if you've made a proper roadmap. The question will be some variation of, which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage, or the author's primary purpose in the passage is to. The old you would read this and think, oh boy, I have to reevaluate the entire passage and weigh all 5 options. The new you sees this question and smiles. Why? Because you've already answered it. The main point is sitting right there at the top of your roadmap under overall purpose. You wrote it down 30 seconds after you finished reading. So, your process is this: the question asks for the main point. You look at your roadmap where you wrote, author argues that a new fossil discovery challenges the long-held theory of aquatic dinosaur evolution. That is your prediction. You have just drawn a bullseye. Now you're not shopping for an answer anymore. You are scanning choices A, B, C, D, and E for a sentence that says, a recent paleontological find casts doubt on a prevailing hypothesis about how certain dinosaurs lived. You see it, you pick it, you're done. It's a matching game, and you already have the winning piece in your hand. You're not getting distracted by an answer choice that talks about a specific detail from paragraph 3, or one that accurately describes the old theory but misses the author's new challenge to it. Those are the traps. They are designed for the shoppers. You, the detective, walk right past them because they don't match your warrant. Let's move on to structure or organization questions. These are the ones that sound like, which of the following best describes the organization of the passage, or the function of the third paragraph is to. Again, this is a direct gift to anyone with a roadmap. A roadmap is a description of the passage's organization. You've already done the work. When you get a question about the overall structure, you just look at your paragraph-by-paragraph summary. P1. Introduced a long-standing scientific puzzle. P2. described a traditional but flawed explanation. P3. Introduced a new theory and the evidence supporting it. P4. Concluded by suggesting the new theory is more comprehensive. Your prediction is: the passage presents a problem, critiques one solution, and then argues for a better solution. You scan the choices. You find the one that says, a problem is identified, a conventional approach is evaluated and dismissed, and an alternative approach is advanced. Match. Done. What if it's more specific, asking about the function of a single paragraph? What is the primary purpose of the second paragraph? You don't go back and reread the whole second paragraph. That's a waste of precious time. You look at your roadmap. Your note for P2 says, explains theory X, the old idea. Notes its main weakness. Can't account for Y. Your prediction is: the second paragraph explains the traditional theory and points out its major flaw. You scan the choices. You ignore the ones that misrepresent the theory or focus on some tiny detail. You find the one that says, to detail a widely held view and note a significant shortcoming of that view. You pick it. You move on. You are operating with surgical precision, not swinging a sledgehammer. Now for the questions that scare people the most into rereading. Specific detail questions. These are the according to the passage, or the passage states that. Questions. They feel like they demand a word-for-word search of the text. They don't. They demand that you know where in the text the detail is located. And what is your roadmap? It's a treasure map. The question asks, according to the passage, the members' people were noteworthy for what aspect of their pottery? Your eyes immediately scan your roadmap, not the passage. You see your note for paragraph 3. P members' pottery. Focus on unique geometric and animal designs. Different from neighbors. That's all you need. Your prediction is: the answer will have something to do with their unique geometric or animal designs. Now you go to the answer choices. The unusual materials they used. Nope, your map doesn't say that. B, their method of mass production. Nope, not on the map. C, the distinctive artistic patterns they created. Bingo! Distinctive artistic patterns is a perfect paraphrase of unique geometric and animal designs. D, their refusal to trade it with other tribes. Not on the map. E, the high monetary value it had. Not on the map. You found the answer in seconds, without getting lost in the weeds of the passage itself. You might, for a question this specific, do a quick confirm step. Your map told you the answer is in paragraph 3. You can quickly glance at that paragraph, spot the words geometric patterns and animal figures, confirm your choice and lock it in. You didn't reread the paragraph. You just executed a targeted strike to verify the location your map gave you. This is the core of the strategy. You are using your roadmap to stay out of the passage. The passage is dense, confusing, and full of traps. Your roadmap is simple, clear, and written in your own words. Trust your map. Use it to predict. Use it to attack. This turns the entire process on its head. You're no longer a passive victim of the LSAT's complexity. You are the one in control. You dictate the terms. You decide what the answer should be, and then you merely identify it in the list they provide. This is the very definition of turning defense into offense. You're not just deflecting their confusing questions. You're preempting them, using the work you already did. This method crushes the most common, most direct question types, the main point, the structure, the specific details. But what about the trickier ones? What about the questions that ask you to read between the lines, to infer something that isn't explicitly stated? What about the questions that ask for the author's tone, or their attitude toward a certain theory? Those require a slightly different, more nuanced approach. They require us to go beyond the structure of the passage and get inside the author's head. And that is exactly where we are going next. We're about to add the final layer to our offensive strategy, a tool that will allow you to dissect authorial intent and conquer even the most abstract questions the LSAT can throw at you. This tool is what separates the 160s from the 170s. It's the difference between merely understanding the words on the page and truly understanding the game the author is playing. We call this final layer identifying the author's agenda. Now you might be thinking, isn't that just the main point? And the answer is a definitive no. The main point is what the author is arguing. The author's agenda is why they are arguing it. It's the purpose, the mission, the strategic objective behind the entire passage. Think of it like this. A lawyer stands up in court. Their main point is, my client is not guilty. That's the what. But their agenda? Their agenda is to persuade the jury of their client's innocence by systematically dismantling the prosecution's evidence and presenting a compelling alternative narrative. See the difference? The agenda is active. It's a verb. It's what the author is trying to do to you, the reader. And on the LSAT, knowing what the author is trying to do to you is your single greatest advantage. The test makers write questions that prey on students who only grasp the what. They'll ask about the author's tone, their purpose, what they would most likely agree with. These are not questions about facts. They are questions about intent. They are questions about the agenda. When you have a firm grip on the author's agenda, you have a master key that unlocks these difficult, abstract questions. It becomes your ultimate filter. You can look at 5 answer choices and immediately discard 3 of them because they simply don't align with the author's mission. So how do we find it? How do we distill an entire 500-word passage into a single powerful sentence that captures this agenda? We use a simple 3-step process. First, we go verb hunting. Second, we check the tone thermometer. And third, we synthesize. Let's start with verb hunting. The LSAT is a test of precise language, and authors use very specific verbs to signal their intentions. Your job, as you finish your initial read-through, is to ask, what is the primary action the author is taking? Are they arguing for a position? Are they critiquing a popular theory? Are they defending an overlooked artist? Are they explaining a complex phenomenon? Are they reconciling 2 seemingly contradictory ideas? Or are they simply describing a historical event? Words like argue, challenge, support, evaluate, propose, and contrast are pure gold. They are the engine of the passage. You're not just looking for the main idea, you're looking for the main action. Circle it, underline it, sear it into your brain. This verb is the foundation of the author's agenda. Next, step 2, the tone thermometer. The author's tone dramatically colors their agenda. An author who critiques a theory with a highly skeptical and dismissive tone has a very different agenda than an author who critiques the same theory with a balanced and respectful tone. The first one wants to tear it down. The second wants to refine it. So you have to ask, what is the author's attitude? Is it positive, negative, or neutral? Let's get more specific. Within neutral, are they purely objective and descriptive like a textbook? Or are they analytical and evaluative, weighing pros and cons? Within positive, are they passionately supportive or just cautiously optimistic? Within negative, are they bitingly critical, gently skeptical, or concerned and cautionary? Gauging this tone is not some fuzzy abstract exercise. It's a practical tool. It helps you understand the intensity and flavor of the author's verb. It tells you how they are carrying out their mission. Which brings us to step 3, synthesize. You're going to combine your verb and your tone analysis into a single concise sentence. This sentence is the ultimate summary of the passage. It's your North Star for answering the questions. The formula looks something like this. The author's primary purpose is to action verb the idea that the main point, tone/manner. Let's make this real. Imagine a passage about a new scientific theory. Let's call it the starlight echo theory, which challenges some aspect of Einstein's theory of relativity. The first paragraph introduces the conventional view from Einstein. The second paragraph introduces the starlight echo theory and the scientist behind it, Dr. Anya Sharma. The third paragraph details the experimental evidence that seems to support Sharma's theory. And the final paragraph discusses the implications and the resistance from the scientific community. Let's find the agenda. Step 1, verb hunting. Is the author just describing the 2 theories? No, it's more than that. The whole passage is structured to build a case for the new theory. The author is presenting or maybe even advocating for the starlight echo theory as a serious challenger to the status quo. Let's go with present for now, as it feels a bit safer than advocate. Step 2, tone thermometer. What's the tone? The author gives a lot of space to Sharma's evidence. They refer to her work as compelling and groundbreaking. When they mention the resistance from the community, they frame it as predictable skepticism rather than justified criticism. The tone isn't neutral. It's clearly positive and supportive of the new theory. It's hopeful. Step 3, synthesize. Let's put it together. The author's purpose is to present the new starlight echo theory as a compelling challenge to conventional physics, in a supportive and optimistic manner. Boom. That's it. That one sentence is now your weapon. Let's see how it works. A question pops up. The primary purpose of the passage is to. You scan the choices. Or reconcile two competing scientific models. Wrong. The author isn't reconciling. They're championing one over the other. Our verb was present, not reconcile. B. Criticize the scientific community for its resistance to new ideas. Tempting, but it's too negative and it's not the primary purpose. The criticism is secondary to the main goal of presenting the new theory. C. Describe the experimental evidence for the starlight echo theory. Too narrow. That was just one paragraph. Our agenda covers the whole passage. D. Argue for the potential validity of a new theory that challenges an established one. This looks good. Argue for the potential validity is a great synonym for our synthesis of present in a supportive manner. This aligns perfectly with our agenda. Let's try another one. The author's attitude toward the starlight echo theory can best be described as a strict neutrality. Wrong. Our tone was supportive. B. Cautious endorsement. This is a strong contender. Cautious endorsement captures the supportive and optimistic, but still academic tone. C. Unqualified enthusiasm. Probably too strong. The author is supportive, but unqualified enthusiasm sounds like a fan, not a serious writer. D. Mild skepticism. Definitely wrong. The author is on the other side. See how it works. The agenda sentence you created becomes a lens. You look at every question and every answer choice through that lens, and the correct path becomes incredibly clear while the wrong paths look obviously distorted. It's no longer about juggling a dozen disconnected facts from the passage. It's about testing every single answer choice against one core idea. Does this fit the author's mission? This is the final piece of our reading strategy. We have our passage map, which gives us the structure, the what. We have our paragraph whys, which give us the function of each part, the how. And now we have the author's agenda, which gives us the overarching mission, the ultimate why. You now understand what the author wrote, how they constructed their argument, and most importantly, why they bothered to write it in the first place. You've moved from being a passive reader, a victim of the LSAT's twists and turns, to an active offensive strategist. You're not just reading the words, you're reading the author's mind. You have the complete blueprint to their argument, and with this blueprint, you are ready to systematically dismantle any question they throw at you. We've spent our time building this powerful analytical weapon. Now it's time to learn how to use it. We need to take this strategy and apply it directly to the major LSAT question types you will face on test day. Because a weapon is useless if you don't know how to aim it. Let's start with the big one, the question that haunts the start of nearly every LSAT reading comp section. The main point question. You know the one. It looks something like, which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? Or the author's primary conclusion is which of the following? This question is the gatekeeper. Get it wrong, and you're starting on the back foot, fundamentally misunderstanding what you just spent 3 precious minutes reading. Get it right, and the rest of the questions for that passage often start to fall like dominoes. Most test prep companies will tell you to look for a thesis statement, usually in the first or last paragraph. And that's not bad advice, but it's incomplete. It's like telling a detective to just look for the murder weapon. What if it's hidden? What if the author uses a more subtle, sophisticated structure? What if the main point isn't explicitly stated in a single sentence but is woven throughout the entire passage? Relying on finding a thesis sentence is a gamble. Our strategy isn't about gambling. It's about certainty. Remember the one thing we were hunting for when we read the passage? The author's opinion. Not the facts, not the background details, but the author's unique take, their argument, their judgment. Well, guess what the main point of a passage is 99% of the time? It's the author's opinion. That's it. That's the secret. The test makers are just asking you in a slightly more formal way. So what was the author trying to convince you of? When you see a main point question, your brain shouldn't panic. It should light up. It should say, they're asking me for the thing I already found. They're handing me points on a silver platter. You already did the hard work. You already identified the author's core argument while you were reading. Now your only job is to find the answer choice that matches the opinion you already have in your head. Let's imagine a short passage about the history of jazz. It might talk about its origins in New Orleans, mention key figures like Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington, and describe its spread to Chicago and New York. A student who's just reading for facts might come away thinking the passage is about the history of jazz. And one of the answer choices will almost certainly say that. Something like, the passage provides a historical overview of the development of jazz music. Sounds plausible, right? But it's a trap. But you, the strategic reader, did something different. While reading, you noticed the author kept using words like however, surprisingly, and mistakenly believed. You noticed that after describing the standard history, the author introduced a lesser-known female artist and argued that her contributions were critically overlooked and fundamentally reshaped the genre's harmonic structure. You identified the author's opinion. The standard history of jazz is incomplete because it ignores the pivotal role of this specific female artist. Now you get to the main point question. You ignore the trap answer about a historical overview. That's just the background, the stage on which the author's real argument plays out. You're looking for the answer choice that captures the author's argument. And there it is, option D. The passage argues that conventional histories of jazz have failed to adequately recognize the influence of a key female innovator. It's a perfect match for the opinion you already found. It's not just about what the passage contains, it's about what the author does with that information. The main point is the argument, not the topic. This is why our strategy is so powerful. It forces you to look beyond the surface-level topic and identify the author's purpose, their reason for writing the passage in the first place. And that is the very essence of a main point. Let's lock this in. After you've identified the author's opinion, you attack the answer choices with a simple framework. The correct answer will be a perfect paraphrase of the author's opinion. The wrong answers will fall into 3 predictable traps. Trap 1, too broad. This is our historical overview of jazz answer. It describes the general topic, but misses the specific argument. Trap 2, too narrow. This answer might focus on one tiny detail mentioned in the passage, like Louis Armstrong was a foundational figure in early jazz. True, the passage might have said that, but it's just one piece of evidence, not the overall argument. It's a single tree, not the whole forest. Trap 3, the contradiction. This answer choice will state the opposite of the author's opinion, or it will misrepresent it in a subtle but fatal way. It might say, the passage suggests that female artists had little substantive impact on jazz. This is designed to catch the careless reader. By using the author's opinion as your weapon, you can slice through these traps with precision. You're not just looking for an answer that feels right. You're actively hunting for the one that matches your preformed conclusion and eliminating the 3 that are designed to deceive you. Now, what about the main point's close cousin, the primary purpose question? This one sounds different. The primary purpose of the passage is to, or which of the following best describes the author's reason for writing the passage? Seems like a new challenge, a different kind of lock to pick. But it isn't. It's the same lock, just with a slightly different keyhole. Think about it. Why does an author write a persuasive or analytical passage for something like the LSAT? They write it to express their main point. They write it to deliver their opinion. The purpose of the passage is to make the argument. The main point and the primary purpose are 2 sides of the same coin. The main point is the what. What is the author arguing? The primary purpose is the why. Why did the author write this? The answer is to argue the what. So when you see a primary purpose question, you do the exact same thing. You take the author's opinion you already found, and you look for the answer choice that describes the action of making that argument. The answer choices for these questions will start with verbs: to argue, to criticize, to explain, to compare, to correct a misconception. Let's go back to our jazz example. The author's opinion was, the standard history of jazz is incomplete because it ignores the pivotal role of a specific female artist. A main point question would have an answer like, conventional histories of jazz have failed to adequately recognize a key female innovator. A primary purpose question would have an answer like, to correct a common misconception in the historical scholarship of jazz. See the connection? It's the same core idea, just framed differently. The main point is the content of the argument. The purpose is the action of arguing. If you have one, you have the other. You don't need a new technique. You just need to recognize the question for what it is. Another request for the author's opinion. So when you see a purpose question, your first step is to recall the author's opinion. Then you attach a verb to it. Was the author arguing for a new theory? Then the purpose is to argue. Were they tearing down an old one? The purpose is to criticize or to challenge. Were they explaining a complex phenomenon? The purpose is to explain. Were they fixing a popular mistake? The purpose is to correct a misconception. The verb you choose must match the tone and intent of the author's opinion you identified. This is the beauty of a truly unified strategy. You're not learning 10 different tricks for 10 different question types. You are learning one powerful analytical lens, finding the author's opinion, and learning to apply it universally. We've just seen how it demolishes the two most common and foundational question types in all of LSAT Reading Comprehension. You're no longer guessing or trying to match keywords. You are entering the question and answer phase with the key already in your hand, fully prepared to unlock the points that are rightfully yours. We've conquered the questions that deal with the passage as a whole. But what about the ones that dive into the details? The questions that ask about a specific paragraph, a specific sentence, or a specific logical relationship within the text. These are the questions that often feel like a scavenger hunt from hell. But they have a weakness. They, too, can be systematically dismantled by focusing on the author's grand design. We're about to turn this so-called scavenger hunt into a guided tour. So how do we do it? How do we take a frantic, time-sucking search for a needle in a haystack and turn it into a calm, predictable stroll to a specific exhibit in a museum? The secret lies in a fundamental shift in perspective. You have to stop seeing the passage as a flat wall of text and start seeing it as a piece of architecture, with a foundation, supporting walls, and a roof. Every detail, every fact, every quote is a brick placed with intention. It's not just there. It's there to do something. The average test taker does the exact opposite. They get a detailed question, something like, the passage states that the proletarian cultural revolution had which of the following effects on rural agriculture? Their eyes glaze over. Their brain short-circuits. Panic sets in. And what do? They grab a keyword from the question, maybe rural agriculture, and they start scanning. Frantically, their finger or their cursor zips up and down the lines of text, looking for that one phrase. It's a game of keyword whack-a-mole. They find the phrase and they think, aha, gotcha. Then they read the sentence it's in, maybe the sentence before and after, and they race back to the answer choices praying something matches. This is a recipe for disaster. Why? Because the LSAT knows that's what you're going to do. They design trap answers specifically for the keyword scanner. They'll create an answer choice that uses the exact phrase rural agriculture, but completely twists the context or the meaning. Or they'll hide the real answer in a different part of the passage that talks about the consequences of the revolution, without ever using the exact words, rural agriculture. The keyword-driven scavenger hunt is a trap. The guided tour is the escape. The guided tour has 3 simple steps: predict, locate, and verify. That's it. It's a system. Step 1 is predict. Before your eyes even start scanning the passage, you look at the question and you make a prediction about where the answer should be. This isn't a wild guess. It's an educated inference based on the mental map you built during your initial read. You ask yourself, what is the function of the detail this question is asking about? Is it a piece of evidence supporting the author's main point? Well, then it's probably going to be in the body paragraph where that point was developed, likely right after the topic sentence. Is it a counter-argument the author is about to debunk? Then it's probably at the beginning of a paragraph, introduced with a phrase like, some scholars argue. Or it might seem that. Is it a key definition? It's almost certainly in the first paragraph. You've already done the hard work of understanding the passage's structure. Now, you use that blueprint to predict the location of the detail. You're not looking for a word, you're looking for a room in the house. Let's imagine a passage about the evolution of jazz music. Paragraph 1 introduces the traditional view of jazz originating solely in New Orleans. Paragraph 2 challenges this, introducing the author's main point, that early forms of jazz developed simultaneously in several cities. Paragraph 3 provides the primary evidence, focusing on the vibrant music scene in Kansas City and citing specific musicians and styles from that area. Paragraph 4 concludes by discussing the implications of this multi-centric view. Now, you get a question. According to the passage, the music of bandleader Benny Moten is cited as an example of what? The keyword scanner panics and starts looking for Benny Moten. But you, the architectural analyst, you take a breath and you predict. Benny Moten. Who is that? He's a specific musician. Why would an author mention a specific musician? To serve as an example. An example of what? An example of the author's main point. And what was the main point? That jazz developed outside of New Orleans. And where did the author provide the main evidence for that point? In the third paragraph, the one about Kansas City. Boom. Before you've even looked back at the passage, you've predicted that the answer is in paragraph 3, and it will connect Benny Moten to the non-New Orleans, Kansas City jazz scene. You've narrowed a 60-line passage down to a 15-line paragraph. You've created your own treasure map. Step 2 is locate. Now you execute. You go directly to your predicted location, in this case paragraph 3, and you find the specific text. You don't reread the whole passage. You don't even reread the whole paragraph. You perform a targeted strike. You scan only that paragraph for the name, Benny Moten, and you find the sentence that contains it. You read that sentence carefully. It might say something like, pioneers in Kansas City, such as bandleader Benny Moten, developed a unique, blues-inflected style that was distinct from the music emerging from the New Orleans Delta. Step 3 is verify. This is the crucial final check. You take the information you just located and you articulate it in your own words. You'd say to yourself, okay, Benny Moten is used as an example of a Kansas City pioneer who developed a style different from New Orleans. Now, with that precise, verified understanding, you go to the answer choices. You are no longer hoping to find a match. You are looking for the answer choice that is an exact paraphrase of the conclusion you've already drawn. You'll see choices like A musician who was heavily influenced by the New Orleans style. Wrong, the passage says his style was distinct from it. B, a challenge to the author's main thesis about jazz's origins. Wrong, he's used as evidence for the thesis. C, a key figure in the development of a regional jazz style outside of New Orleans. That's it. That's a perfect paraphrase of what you verified. D, the most influential jazz musician of the 20th century. Tempting, maybe, but the passage never makes such a sweeping claim. It's out of scope. Notice the difference in power. You weren't hunting. You weren't guessing. You were in complete control. You used the author's own logic and structure against the question. You told the test where the answer had to be, you went there and you took it. This is what turns a 90-second panic into a 30-second confident process. This method also short-circuits the most common detail question traps. The most dangerous trap is what I call the true, but wrong location answer. This is an answer choice that states something factually true from the passage, but it doesn't answer the specific question being asked. It's often a detail pulled from a completely different paragraph. The keyword scanner falls for this every time because they see a familiar phrase and they grab it. But the predict, locate, verify method makes you immune. If the question asks why the author mentions Benny Moten in paragraph 3, you're not going to get fooled by an answer choice that accurately quotes a detail about New Orleans from paragraph 1. Your prediction has already focused you on the right part of the passage, on the right function. This works for everything. Science passages. A question about a specific experiment's methodology will be in the paragraph describing that experiment, which will follow the paragraph that introduced the hypothesis the experiment was designed to test. Law-related passages. A question about a specific legal precedent will be in the paragraph where the author is using that precedent to support a larger argument about a judicial trend. The structure is always there. The details are never random. They are soldiers, and you, by understanding the battle plan, are the general. You know where every soldier is supposed to be and what job they're supposed to be doing. So from now on, I want you to banish the phrase scavenger hunt from your vocabulary. When you see a specific detail question, I want you to think guided tour. I want you to see your mental map of the passage. I want you to place an X on the exact spot where the answer lives, and I want you to go there with the confidence of someone who owns the building. This handles the questions about what the passage explicitly states. But what about the questions that ask you to go a step further? The ones that ask you to read between the lines to figure out what the author implies or what can be inferred from the text. These are the questions that separate the good scores from the great scores. They require you to move beyond simply finding information and into the realm of logical deduction. They require you to understand not just what the author said, but what the author had to believe in order to say it. And just like the other question types, there is a system for cracking them wide open. So let's talk about the single most important rule for inference questions. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. The correct answer to an LSAT inference question is something that must be true based on the information in the passage. Not probably true. Not likely true. Not makes a lot of sense. It must be a statement that is 100%, undeniably logically forced to be true by the text. Think of it like a mathematical proof. If I tell you that x is greater than y, and y is greater than z, what can you infer? You can infer with absolute certainty that x is greater than z. There is no other possibility. That is the level of certainty the LSAT demands. The correct answer is an airtight logical deduction. It's not a guess about the author's mood or what they might believe in their spare time. It's what the words on the page absolutely guarantee. This leads us to our core strategy, which I call prove it or lose it. For every single answer choice on an inference question, your job is to play the role of a skeptical prosecutor. Your default assumption is that the answer choice is wrong. You must then search the passage for concrete evidence, specific lines, phrases, or sentences that can prove the answer choice is correct beyond a reasonable doubt. If you cannot find that definitive proof, you must eliminate the answer choice. You lose it. No matter how good it sounds, no matter how reasonable it seems, if you can't point to the text and say, "This right here proves it," then it's a trap. And the LSAT test makers are masters of laying these traps. They design wrong answer choices that are specifically engineered to appeal to our everyday conversational understanding of inference, not the strict logical definition. Let's break down the most common traps you'll see. First, the most seductive trap of all. The could be true answer. These are statements that are plausible extensions of the text. They seem to fit with the passage's tone and topic, but they are not explicitly supported. The passage simply doesn't give enough information to confirm them. For example, if a passage describes the devastating effects of a new invasive insect on corn crops, a could be true answer might be, farmers' profits in the region likely decreased as a result of the insect. This seems incredibly logical, right? But if the passage doesn't mention profits or the economic impact, we can't prove it. Maybe the government provided subsidies. Maybe the farmer switched to a different crop. We don't know. The passage doesn't say. So we can't pick it. Could be true, but it doesn't have to be true. Second is the extreme language trap. These are answer choices that contain words like all, every, never, only, always, or none. Academic and legal writing, the kind you see on the LSAT, is typically nuanced and careful. Authors rarely make such absolute sweeping claims. Therefore, it's very difficult to find proof for an answer choice that does. If the passage says, "Some legal scholars have criticized the ruling," an extreme answer choice might say, "The legal community was universally opposed to the ruling." See the difference? Some is not universally. It's an easy elimination if you're looking for it. Third, we have the reverse logic trap. This is where the answer choice takes elements from the passage but flips the relationship between them. If the passage states that the development of agriculture led to more sedentary societies, a reverse logic trap might suggest that the desire for a sedentary lifestyle prompted the development of agriculture. It uses all the right keywords, but it gets the cause and effect backward. Finally, there's the outside knowledge trap. This one is particularly nasty for people who happen to know something about the topic. The answer choice might be a factually correct statement in the real world, but if it's not supported by the passage itself, it's wrong. You must pretend you are a blank slate, that the only information that exists in the universe is what's written in those 450 words on the screen. If you're reading a passage about Beethoven's symphonies, and an answer choice mentions Mozart, even if the statement about Mozart is true, it's wrong unless the passage also mentioned Mozart. So let's put this into practice. Imagine we've just read a short passage. Here it is. The collapse of the late Bronze Age civilizations, a widespread societal disintegration around 1200 BCE, remains a puzzle for historians. While early theories often cited a single catastrophic cause, such as the mysterious Sea Peoples invasions or a sudden climate shift, contemporary scholarship increasingly points to a systems collapse model. This model posits that the interconnectedness of the Aegean and Near Eastern states, once a source of their strength, became a critical vulnerability. The disruption of any one key trading partner, say the loss of Cypriot copper or Mycenaean pottery, could trigger a cascading failure across the entire network. This is not to say that external pressures were irrelevant. Rather, the systems model suggests that the civilization's internal structure, specifically their overspecialization and lack of economic diversity, made them uniquely fragile and unable to absorb shocks that less complex societies might have survived. Now, here's our question. The passage suggests which one of the following? And here are our answer choices. Let's apply the prove it or lose it strategy. Answer A. The Sea Peoples were not a factor in the collapse of Bronze Age civilizations. Let's go back to the text. The passage says, early theories often cited a single catastrophic cause, such as the mysterious Sea Peoples invasions. It then says the new model doesn't mean external pressures were irrelevant. This means the Sea Peoples could very well have been a factor. The passage doesn't say they weren't. It just says they aren't the sole single cause. So, we cannot prove that they were not a factor. This is a classic could be true trap, but in reverse. We can't prove this definitive negative statement. So we lose it. Answer B. No Bronze Age civilization had a sufficiently diverse economy to survive the crisis. What's the trap here? The extreme language. The word no. The passage says the civilizations had a lack of economic diversity and were uniquely fragile. But does it say that none of them had a sufficiently diverse economy? That's a very high bar for proof. The passage describes a general condition, but it doesn't make a blanket statement about every single civilization. Proving that no civilization did something is nearly impossible from this text. We can't prove it, so we lose it. Answer C. Societal collapses are more likely to occur in civilizations with complex trading networks than in those without. This one sounds really smart, doesn't it? Feels like the main idea. But let's be strict prosecutors. Can we prove it? The passage discusses one specific historical event, the Late Bronze Age collapse. It argues that in this specific case, the interconnectedness became a vulnerability. Does it make a general, universal rule that this is always more likely? No. It analyzes one instance. To make this a universal claim would be to go beyond the evidence provided. This is a subtle overstatement, a form of the could-be-true trap. We lose it. Answer D. According to the system's collapse model, a disruption in trade could be a cause of the collapse, rather than just a consequence of it. Okay, let's hunt for proof. The passage says the system's collapse model posits that the interconnectedness became a critical vulnerability. It continues, the disruption of any one key trading partner could trigger a cascading failure. This is direct proof. It explicitly states that a trade disruption could be a trigger, in other words, a cause of the larger failure. This statement is a direct, logical restatement of what the text says. It must be true. This is our winner. But let's check answer E just to be sure. Answer E. Early historical theories about the Bronze Age collapse were less sophisticated than contemporary scholarship. This is another very tempting trap. Feels true. I mean, early theories versus contemporary scholarship usually implies an improvement. The passage calls early theories single catastrophic cause models and the new one a systems collapse model, which sounds more complex. But does the passage ever explicitly state that one is less sophisticated? No. It describes them, but it never passes that specific judgment. That's our own interpretation, our own outside assumption. The passage doesn't use that word or any synonym. We cannot prove it from the text. So we lose it. So you see, only one answer, choice D, survived the prove it or lose it test. It wasn't about having a feel for the passage. It was a cold, mechanical process of finding direct textual evidence. That is how you conquer inference questions. You stop being a creative reader, and you start being a logical detective, hunting for proof and mercilessly eliminating anything that can't be backed up by the facts on the page. This systematic approach transforms one of the most feared question types into a straightforward, methodical exercise. Now, let's apply this detective mindset to the final boss of reading comprehension, the comparative passage. This is the one that shows up on screen and makes your heart sink just a little. Two passages labeled A and B, followed by a whole new set of questions. The conventional wisdom, the advice you'll hear from 1,000 different places, is to read passage A, answer the questions about passage A, then read passage B, answer the questions about passage B, and finally tackle the questions that ask about both. I'm here to tell you that this is one of the most inefficient and mentally taxing ways to approach this section. It's a trap. It treats the two passages like separate assignments you have to complete in sequence. By the time you're deeply into passage B, the specific details and nuances of passage A have started to fade. Your short-term memory, already under immense pressure, begins to jettison information it thinks is no longer relevant. Then you hit the synthesis questions, the ones asking how the author of B would view the argument in A, or what both authors would agree on, and you're forced into a frantic, time-consuming scramble, rereading and rescanning both texts, trying to reconstruct a relationship that you never built in the first place. It's like trying to describe a conversation you only listen to one side of at a time. It's disjointed, it's exhausting, and it's where points go to die. So let's throw that entire method in the garbage. Our simple strategy requires a profound shift in perspective. You are not reading two separate passages. You are analyzing one single dialogue. Passage A is the first speaker. Passage B is the second speaker, responding to, building on, or tearing down what the first one said. Your job isn't to be a stenographer for two different monologues. It's to be a relationship counselor for a single, complex conversation. Here's how it works in practice. First, you read passage A, but your goal isn't just to understand it in a vacuum. Your goal is to build a complete profile of speaker A. What is their main point? What is their tone? Are they academic, critical, celebratory? What are the key pieces of evidence or the main structural pillars they use to support their argument? You're not just reading. You're preparing for the other side of the conversation. You need to have Passage A's identity locked down cold. Then the magic happens. You begin reading Passage B. But you are not reading it with a blank slate. You are reading it through the lens of Passage A. With every single sentence you read in Passage B, you are actively, aggressively asking yourself one question. How does this connect to Passage A? Is the author of Passage B agreeing with A's main point but offering a different example? Are they disagreeing entirely, presenting a counter-argument? Are they taking A's general idea and narrowing its scope, saying, yes, but this only applies in this specific context? Or are they broadening it, saying, this isn't just true for X, it's true for Y and Z as well? Are they discussing the cause of a phenomenon that Passage A only described the effects of? Are they challenging the very evidence that Passage A used as its foundation? You are turning your reading process into a real-time comparative analysis. You are not waiting for the questions to ask you about the relationship between the passages. You are defining that relationship for yourself, line by line, as you read. Let's imagine a scenario. Passage A argues that the rise of the novel in the 18th century was almost entirely due to rising literacy rates among the middle class. It cites economic data, publishing records, and so on. You read it, you map it, you understand its core argument: literacy was the engine. Now you start Passage B. The first sentence says, while economic factors like literacy were influential, the novel's ascendancy is more deeply rooted in new philosophical concepts of individualism. Boom! In one sentence, you know the entire relationship. Passage B isn't disagreeing that literacy was a factor, so it's not a direct contradiction. Instead, it's a reprioritization. It's saying, you're looking at the wrong cause. Your factor is secondary. My factor is primary. As you continue reading B, you're not just absorbing its points about individualism, you're constantly slotting them into this framework. You're noting how B's philosophical evidence contrasts with A's economic evidence. You're seeing that both authors agree the novel rose in the 18th century, but they fundamentally disagree on the why. By the time you finish reading Passage B, you have already done the heaviest lifting of the entire set. You haven't just read two passages. You've mapped their points of agreement, their points of conflict, their differences in evidence, and their differences in scope. Now look what happens when you get to the questions. A question asks, which of the following best describes the relationship between the two passages? For you, this is a softball. You already know Passage B reframes the cause of the phenomenon discussed in Passage, shifting the focus from an economic to a philosophical explanation. You're not searching for the answer. You're looking for the answer choice that matches the conclusion you already drew. A question asks, the author of Passage B would most likely criticize the argument in Passage A for. Again, you know this. They would criticize it for being too simplistic, for overemphasizing an economic symptom while ignoring the deeper philosophical root cause. A question asks, on which of the following points would the authors of both passages be most likely to agree? Easy. They agree on the outcome. The novel became a dominant literary form in the 18th century. They just disagree on the reason. This dialogue method transforms the comparative reading section from a brutal memory challenge into an engaging, analytical puzzle. The synthesis questions, which are the hardest and most time-consuming for most people, become the easiest for you, because you've been synthesizing from the very first sentence of Passage B. You're no longer reacting to the test. You are anticipating it. You are doing the very analytical work the questions will demand of you before you even see them. This is what it means to read with purpose. It means understanding that the structure of the LSAT isn't arbitrary. The comparative passage is designed specifically to test your ability to track, compare, and evaluate two related but distinct viewpoints. The old method resists this design, fights against it. Our method embraces it. It aligns your reading process with the fundamental logic of the task itself. You stop seeing two separate blocks of text and start seeing the points of contact, the friction, the intellectual sparks that fly between them. This approach doesn't just save you time and reduce stress. It leads you directly to the heart of what the passage set is all about, making the questions a simple matter of confirming the insights you've already uncovered. So when you get to the questions, you're no longer hunting in the dark. You're a detective returning to the scene of the crime not to find new clues, but to bag and tag the evidence that proves a theory you've already formed. The questions become a confirmation, not a new investigation. This is the final crucial shift in mindset that separates the 170 score from everyone else. They don't see the questions as the primary challenge. They see the passage as the challenge. And once the passage is conquered, the questions are merely the spoils of victory. This entire system, whether for a single dense passage on judicial philosophy or a dueling set of opinions on astrobiology, boils down to one fundamental shift in perspective. You must stop being a reader and start being an architect. A reader consumes. A reader is passive. They let the words wash over them, hoping that enough will stick through sheer force of will. But an architect doesn't just look at a building. An architect understands the blueprint. They see the load-bearing walls, the structural supports, the foundational principles upon which everything else is built. They understand how the electrical system in the attic connects to the plumbing in the basement. They see the grand design. That is your job. With every passage, you are the architect. Your first read-through is not for comprehension in the traditional sense. It is a survey of the site. You are identifying 4 things and only 4 things: the main point, the rooftop, the single idea that the entire structure is built to support. The structure, the load-bearing walls, the 1 or 2 key supporting arguments or shifts in topic that hold up that main point. The tone, the style of the building. Is it critical, celebratory, neutral, objective? And finally, the paragraph purpose, the function of each individual room. Why is this paragraph here? Is it providing historical context? Is it introducing a counterargument? Is it giving a specific example? The single biggest mistake students make is treating the passage like a sacred text they must memorize. They read with a highlighter in a death grip, coloring every other sentence, terrified of missing a single, obscure detail about the migratory patterns of the monarch butterfly mentioned in line 47. But the LSAT isn't a test of memory. It's a test of reasoning. Your highlighter isn't a tool for memorization. It should be a spotlight, used sparingly to illuminate the structural pillars of the argument, not to paint the entire building yellow. By focusing on the blueprint, you liberate yourself from the tyranny of the details. The details don't matter until a question specifically asks about them. And when it does, because you have the blueprint, you know exactly which room of the house to go to find the answer. You don't have to search the whole building. You just go to the second-floor bathroom, so to speak, where you already know that specific piece of information resides. This approach is the ultimate antidote to the most common LSAT poison: panic. Panic comes from feeling lost. It comes from staring at a wall of text and having no idea where to begin, feeling the clock tick down as your eyes glaze over. But an architect is never lost. An architect has a process. They have a system. By focusing on structure first, you are giving your brain a clear, manageable task. You are imposing order on chaos. This process builds momentum and confidence. It turns a daunting, amorphous block of text into a predictable, solvable puzzle. The clock becomes your ally, not your enemy, because you're no longer wasting precious seconds rereading the same 5 paragraphs over and over, praying for an answer to materialize. You read with purpose once and then you execute. Let's use a more vivid analogy. Imagine you're a lead detective arriving at a complex crime scene. The rookies are running around, dusting every single surface for fingerprints, bagging every piece of lint, measuring the distance between every piece of furniture. They're drowning in details and they have no idea what any of it means. But you, the veteran, you stand back for a moment. You don't touch anything. You take in the whole scene. You ask the big questions first. What's the story here? What was the motive? Who benefits from this? You're looking for the narrative of the crime. Once you have a working theory of the case, the main point, asterisk then asterisk, you direct your team to look for specific evidence. The fingerprints on the window, the fiber on the rug, the overturned lamp, they only matter because they confirm or deny your theory. That's how you need to approach every LSAT passage. The passage is the crime scene. Your first read is to develop a theory of the case. The questions are the district attorney, asking you to present the specific evidence that supports your case. And because you already understand the story, you know exactly where to find it. So here is your mission should you choose to accept it. For the next 7 days, I want you to forget about speed. I know that sounds like heresy, but trust me. Take one and only one LSAT reading comprehension passage each day. Put the timer in another room. Your only goal is to apply this architectural method. Before you even think about looking at a question, I want you to physically write down, in your own words, 3 things. 1. What is the single sentence main point of this passage? 2. What is the primary purpose of each paragraph in supporting that main point? Just a few words for each. And 3, what is the author's tone or perspective? Do this first. Every single time. First, it will feel slow. It will feel unnatural. You'll be fighting that deep-seated urge to just dive in and start consuming facts. But by day 3, something will shift. You'll start seeing the patterns before you even finish the passage. By day 5, you'll find yourself predicting the kinds of questions they're going to ask. You'll read a paragraph that introduces a counter-argument and you'll think, ah, there's definitely going to be a question about the author's response to this. By day 7, you'll realize that the 2 or 3 minutes you invest up front in understanding the blueprint saves you 4 or 5 minutes on the back end. You'll answer questions with a confidence and a precision that feels like a superpower. Because this isn't just a testing strategy. This is legal training in disguise. Think about it. What does a great lawyer actually do? They take a chaotic mess of facts, a 1,000-page discovery file, a rambling client deposition, and they find the story. They find the central argument. They build a case, a logical structure that is clear, compelling, and persuasive. They don't memorize every single detail. They understand how the critical details fit together to support their main point. The LSAT isn't trying to make you a trivia champion on the subject of 18th century pottery. It's forging you into a thinker. It's teaching you to slice through the noise and find the signal. Every passage you deconstruct, every blueprint you uncover, is a repetition in the gym for your legal mind. You're building the mental muscle that will one day allow you to stand up in a courtroom and command the narrative, to write a brief that cuts directly to the heart of the issue, to advise a client with clarity and conviction when they are lost in the chaos. So the next time you open that test booklet and see that intimidating wall of text, don't see a threat. Don't see an obstacle. See an opportunity. See a building waiting for its architect. See a crime scene waiting for its detective. Don't just read the words. Deconstruct the argument. Find the blueprint. Because once you see the structure, the details fall into place. The questions become echoes of your own understanding. And the passage ceases to be a barrier between you and your goal, and instead becomes the very path that leads you there. The power isn't in knowing all the facts. It's in understanding the one big idea that holds them all together. Find that idea and you've found the key. Not just to the passage, but to the way of thinking you'll use for the rest of your career.